Ryan Thompson stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his downtown office, watching the city come alive 40 floors below. At 32, he had turned a simple app idea into a tech empire worth billions. His company, TechFlow Solutions, had offices in 12 countries and employed over 50,000 people. But tonight, he wasn't thinking about quarterly reports or market expansion. He was thinking about something much more personal. The elevator doors opened behind him, and his longtime friend and business advisor, David Park, walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. They had known each other since college, and David was one of the few people who could speak honestly with Ryan about anything. "So, have you made your decision?" David asked, handing Ryan a steaming cup. Ryan turned away from the window and sat down in his leather chair. "I think so, but you're going to think it's crazy," David laughed. "Coming from the guy who bet his entire savings on an app that helps people organize their grocery lists? I doubt anything you do will surprise me now." Ryan pulled out a thick folder from his desk drawer. Inside were detailed profiles of 12 women, each more accomplished than the last. There were company founders, doctors who had revolutionized medical procedures, lawyers who had won cases that changed laws, and investors who could spot winning businesses from miles away. "I want to find a partner," Ryan said simply. "Not just someone to date or marry, but a real partner. Someone who can stand beside me in business and in life." David raised an eyebrow. "And you think you'll find her through some kind of competition?" "Not a competition," Ryan corrected. "Think of it as a series of real-world challenges. I want to see how these women think under pressure, how they solve problems, how they handle crisis situations. I want to know if we can work together when things get tough." The idea had come to Ryan after his last relationship ended badly 6 months ago. Victoria had been beautiful and smart, but when his company faced a major crisis that required him to work 18-hour days for 3 weeks straight, she couldn't handle the pressure. She wanted a boyfriend who would take her to fancy dinners and weekend trips, not a business partner who might need to cancel plans to handle emergencies. "These 12 women," Ryan continued, "they all understand what it means to build something from nothing. They know about sacrifice and hard work, but I need to know if we're compatible when it really matters." David flipped through the profiles. "This is quite a list. Jennifer Walsh, the heart surgeon who developed that new procedure everyone's talking about. Patricia Martinez, who just raised $200 million for her renewable energy company. Lisa Chang, the lawyer who took on those tech giants and won. These women don't need your money, Ryan. What makes you think they'll be interested in your little experiment?" Ryan smiled. "Because they're all as driven as I am. They understand that finding the right partner isn't just about romance. It's about finding someone who makes you better, who challenges you, who can handle the pressure when everyone else runs away." Over the next 2 weeks, Ryan personally reached out to each woman. To his surprise, all 12 agreed to participate. Some were curious about the unusual approach. Others were intrigued by the business challenges he described. A few admitted they had been watching his company's success and were interested in getting to know the man behind it. The Partnership Challenge, as Ryan decided to call it, would take place over 3 days at a luxury retreat center just outside the city. He had designed 5 different scenarios that would test everything from strategic thinking to crisis management to team leadership. These weren't just business simulations. They were real problems his company had faced, modified to protect confidential information. Meanwhile, across town in TechFlow's main office building, Isabella Rodriguez was staying late again. As a senior data analyst, she often found herself working after everyone else had gone home. The office was quiet except for the hum of computers and the occasional sound of the cleaning crew making their rounds. Isabella loved her job, even if most people didn't really understand what she did. While others focused on the big picture, she dove deep into patterns and trends that others missed. Her reports had influenced some of the company's biggest decisions, though she rarely got credit for it. That didn't bother her much. She was more interested in solving puzzles than getting recognition. She had heard the rumors about Ryan's unusual partner search, of course. In a company of 50,000 people, gossip traveled fast. Some people thought it was brilliant. Others called it weird or desperate. Isabella didn't have strong opinions either way. She figured successful people did things differently. And if this worked for him, good for him. What she didn't know was that a simple computer glitch was about to change her life forever. The next morning, Isabella arrived at work to find an elegant invitation on her desk. The expensive paper stock and formal calligraphy were definitely not typical office communications. She opened it carefully and read, "Ms. Rodriguez, you have been selected to participate in the TechFlow Partnership Challenge. This exclusive 3-day event will test your strategic thinking, leadership abilities, and problem-solving skills through a series of real-world business scenarios. Please report to the Grandview Retreat Center this Friday at 9 a.m. Formal business attire required." Isabella stared at the invitation for a full minute. This had to be some kind of mistake. She wasn't a CEO or famous surgeon. She was just a data analyst who preferred working with spreadsheets to giving presentations. She didn't even own what most people would consider formal business attire. She took the invitation to her supervisor, Michael Kim, who looked just as confused as she felt. "I have no idea how this happened," Michael said, turning the invitation over in his hands. "But it looks official. Maybe there was some kind of mix-up in the system when they generated the participant list. Should I just ignore it?" Isabella asked. Michael thought for a moment. "You know what? Maybe this is the universe telling you something. You've been working here for 3 years and your insights have influenced major company decisions. Maybe it's time people started noticing your contributions." Isabella spent the rest of the week in a state of nervous excitement. She had to borrow a business suit from her sister Carmen, who worked in corporate banking. She practiced introducing herself in the mirror, trying to sound confident and professional. She researched the other participants online and felt increasingly out of place. Jennifer Walsh had performed the first successful heart transplant using a revolutionary new technique. Patricia Martinez had been featured on the cover of 3 business magazines in the past year. Lisa Chang had given a TED Talk that had been viewed over 5 million times. What was Isabella Rodriguez, Excel spreadsheet expert, doing in this group? Friday morning came faster than she expected. As Isabella walked into the Grandview Retreat Center, she was struck by how elegant everything looked. The building was all glass and steel, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens. Inside, the lobby featured modern art and furniture that probably cost more than her annual salary. She checked in at the reception desk, where a friendly woman in an expensive suit confirmed her participation and handed her a welcome packet. As she walked toward the main conference room, Isabella could hear confident voices and laughter coming from inside. She paused at the doorway, suddenly feeling like she was about to walk into a room where she clearly didn't belong. The 11 other women were already there, and they all looked exactly like what Isabella had imagined. They wore tailored suits that fit perfectly, carried designer handbags, and spoke with the kind of confidence that came from years of making important decisions. Jennifer Walsh was discussing her latest research with 2 other women. Patricia Martinez was on her phone, apparently closing some kind of business deal even though it was barely 9 in the morning. Lisa Chang was reviewing documents that looked like they could be contracts worth millions of dollars. Then Isabella saw Ryan Thompson himself walk into the room, and she understood immediately why these accomplished women had agreed to participate in his unusual experiment. He had the kind of presence that made people pay attention, not because he was loud or demanding, but because he seemed completely comfortable with himself and his success. "Ladies," Ryan said, and the room immediately quieted. "Thank you all for being here. I know this is an unconventional approach, and I appreciate your willingness to participate in something that's never been done before." He gestured toward a large screen at the front of the room. "Over the next 3 days, we're going to work through 5 different scenarios. These are all based on real situations my company has faced. There are no trick questions and no right or wrong answers. I'm simply looking to understand how you think, how you approach problems, and how we might work together." Isabella found herself a seat in the back row, hoping to observe more than participate. But as Ryan began explaining the first challenge, she found herself genuinely interested despite her nervousness. The first scenario involved a product launch that had gone wrong. A major software update had caused problems for millions of users, social media was exploding with complaints, and the company's stock price was dropping by the hour. The challenge was to develop a comprehensive response plan that would address the technical. The second day of the partnership challenge started with an atmosphere that felt noticeably different from the first. The initial excitement and curiosity had been replaced by something more intense. Isabella could sense it the moment she walked into the conference room. These accomplished women were now viewing each other as competition rather than colleagues. Ryan stood at the front of the room, looking fresh and energetic, Despite what must have been a late night reviewing the previous day's presentations, he had changed from his usual business casual attire into a sharp navy suit that made him look even more authoritative than usual. "Good morning, everyone," he began. "Yesterday's challenge was about problem solving under pressure. Today, we're going to focus on leadership and team management. The scenario you'll be working with is based on one of the most difficult periods in TechFlow's history." He clicked a remote, and the large screen displayed what looked like an organizational chart, but with several departments highlighted in red. 2 years ago, we acquired a smaller company that specialized in artificial intelligence. The integration should have been straightforward, but it turned into a nightmare. The AI team felt like their culture was being destroyed. Our existing employees were worried about job security, and productivity dropped by 30% across both divisions. Isabella found herself leaning forward, genuinely interested. She remembered when this acquisition had happened, though as a mid-level employee, she had only heard rumors about the problems it caused. "Your challenge today is to step into the role of integration manager," Ryan continued. "You have 6 weeks to turn this situation around. You'll be dealing with angry employees, suspicious managers, conflicting priorities, and a board of directors who were starting to question whether the acquisition was a mistake. Unlike yesterday's team-based approach, this challenge would be handled individually. Each woman would have to present her strategy to a panel that included Ryan and 3 other TechFlow executives. They would have 3 hours to prepare, and then each presentation would be followed by an intensive question and answer session designed to test how well they could defend their decisions under pressure. Isabella watched as the other participants immediately began strategizing. Jennifer Walsh grabbed several markers and started creating flowcharts on a whiteboard. Patricia Martinez was already on her phone, apparently calling contacts who might have dealt with similar integration challenges. Rebecca Thompson had pulled out a tablet and was taking notes as she spoke quietly to herself, working through different scenarios. The energy in the room was electric, but Isabella noticed something that made her uncomfortable. The collaborative spirit from yesterday had completely disappeared. When Jennifer asked to borrow a pen, Patricia pretended not to hear. When Rebecca tried to ask one of the executives a clarifying question, Lisa Chang deliberately stepped in front of her to ask her own question first. Isabella found a quiet corner and opened her laptop. While the others focused on big-picture strategies and management theories, she decided to approach the problem the way she always did, by diving into the data. The scenario materials included employee surveys, productivity reports, and communication logs from the actual integration period. As she analyzed the information, patterns began to emerge that painted a clearer picture of what had really gone wrong. The problem wasn't just about cultural differences or management styles. The data showed that the integration had failed because nobody had bothered to understand what the AI team actually did or why their different approach to work was so effective. The AI company had operated more like a research lab than a traditional business. Their employees worked unusual hours, collaborated in ways that seemed chaotic to outsiders, and measured success differently than TechFlow's more structured environment. When TechFlow tried to impose their systems and schedules, it had been like trying to force a jazz band to play classical music. Technically possible, but it killed everything that made them special. 3 hours passed quickly. When presentation time began, Isabella volunteered to go last, partly because she wanted to hear the other approaches and partly because she was still nervous about speaking in front of Ryan and the executive panel. Jennifer went first, and her presentation was exactly what Isabella had expected: polished, confident, and thoroughly professional. She had created a detailed timeline for the integration, with clear milestones and measurable goals. Her strategy focused on establishing strong leadership, improving communication channels, and implementing standardized processes across both teams. The key to successful integration, Jennifer concluded, is clear authority and consistent expectations. People need to know who's in charge and what's expected of them. Once you establish that framework, the rest falls into place. The executives nodded approvingly and asked several questions about implementation details. Jennifer handled them smoothly, referencing case studies from other successful mergers and acquisitions. Patricia was up next, and her approach was more business-focused. She had calculated the financial impact of the AI integration problems and developed a strategy centered on performance incentives and restructuring to eliminate redundancies. Sometimes you have to make tough decisions, she said firmly. If certain employees can't adapt to the new environment, it's better to help them transition out rather than let their resistance undermine the entire integration. We're not running a social club, we're building a business. Her presentation included detailed cost-benefit analyses and projections showing how her approach could not only solve the integration problems but actually improve overall company profitability. The executives seemed impressed by her thorough financial modeling. Rebecca took a different angle, focusing on change management and organizational psychology. She had researched best practices from companies like Google and Microsoft, proposing a structured program that would gradually blend the two company cultures over a period of months. Integration isn't just about combining two organizations, she explained. It's about creating something new that incorporates the best elements of both cultures while eliminating the conflicts that prevent effective collaboration. Her presentation included detailed training programs, team-building exercises, and communication strategies designed to help employees from both companies understand and appreciate each other's approaches. One by one, the other participants presented their strategies. Each approach was thoughtful and well-researched, backed up by impressive credentials and confident delivery. Isabella began to wonder if she had completely misunderstood the challenge. Maybe the executives were looking for traditional management solutions, and her data-driven insights were irrelevant. When her turn finally came, Isabella felt her hands shaking slightly as she connected her laptop to the presentation system. Unlike the others, she hadn't created elaborate slides or detailed organizational charts. Instead, she had prepared what looked more like a research report, filled with graphs and data analysis. Before I talk about solutions, she began, her voice quieter than she would have liked. I want to show you what the data tells us about what actually went wrong. She clicked to her first slide, which showed productivity metrics from both companies in the months leading up to the acquisition. Everyone assumes that the AI team's productivity dropped because they were resistant to change or unhappy about the acquisition. But look at this pattern. The graph showed that the AI team's productivity had actually started declining 3 months before the acquisition was announced, during a period when they were working on a particularly challenging project that required intense focus and collaboration. The timing wasn't about the acquisition, Isabella continued, gaining confidence as she explained her analysis. It was about the type of work they were doing. When you look at their historical patterns, their productivity always fluctuated based on project phases. They would have periods of intense research and experimentation where traditional metrics didn't capture their real progress, followed by breakthrough periods where they produced incredible results very quickly. She clicked to the next slide, showing communication patterns between the two teams. The integration failed because we tried to measure and manage the AI team using metrics that were designed for a different type of work. It's like judging a painter based on how many brushstrokes they make per hour. Isabella could see that she had the executive's attention now. Even Ryan was leaning forward, studying her graphs with interest. "So what's your solution?" asked Victoria Chen, the chief operating officer. Isabella took a deep breath. "Instead of trying to force the AI team into our existing structure, we should create a hybrid model. Let them maintain their research-focused approach while establishing better communication bridges with our development teams. The data shows that their most productive periods happened when they had both autonomy and clear connection to practical applications." She showed them her proposed organizational structure, which looked more like a network than a traditional hierarchy. This isn't about choosing between two different approaches. It's about creating a system where both approaches can work together effectively. The question and answer session that followed was more intense than Isabella had expected. The third and final day of the partnership challenge arrived with an atmosphere of nervous anticipation. Only 6 women remained from the original 12, and Isabella could feel the tension in the air as soon as she entered the retreat center. The spacious conference room that had felt crowded on the first day now seemed almost empty with half the participants gone. Ryan stood at the front of the room, but his usual confident demeanor seemed different today. He looked tired, and Isabella wondered if the previous day's disappointing results had affected him more than he had let on. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "Ladies, thank you for staying through what I know has been a challenging process," he began. Today's final scenario is the most complex one we'll face, because it's happening right now in real time. He gestured toward the large screen, which displayed what looked like a news website with several alarming headlines. TechFlow faces major data breach. Millions of user accounts potentially compromised. Stock price plummets as investors lose confidence. Isabella felt her stomach drop. These weren't mock headlines for a simulation. They were real news stories that had broken just hours ago. She pulled out her phone and quickly confirmed that TechFlow's stock had indeed fallen by 15% in pre-market trading. At 3 a.m. this morning, Ryan continued, his voice steady despite the circumstances, our security team discovered that hackers had gained access to one of our customer databases. We immediately shut down the affected systems and began our incident response protocols. But the damage was done. The story broke on tech blogs an hour ago, and it's spreading across mainstream media. He paused, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. This isn't a simulation or a case study. This is my company facing a real crisis, and I need real solutions. Your challenge today is to help me navigate through this crisis while it's actually happening. Isabella looked around the room at the other remaining participants. Rebecca Thompson was already taking notes, her experience as a venture capitalist clearly helping her process the business implications quickly. Lisa Chang, the lawyer, was scrolling through her phone, probably looking for more details about the legal ramifications. The other three women, Maria Santos, a crisis management consultant, Rachel Kim, a former government cybersecurity expert, and Nancy Williams, a public relations specialist, were each approaching the problem from their areas of expertise. Here's what we know so far, Ryan continued, clicking to a detailed briefing slide. Approximately 2.3 million user accounts were accessed, including names, email addresses, and encrypted passwords. No financial information or social security numbers were compromised, but the hackers did access some personal project files that users had stored on our platform. The room was silent except for the sound of people typing notes and the occasional buzz of phones receiving news alerts. Isabella realized that she was witnessing something extraordinary, a real-time crisis management situation with millions of dollars and thousands of jobs at stake. You have 2 hours to develop your recommendations, Ryan said. But unlike the previous challenges, you won't be presenting to a panel. You'll be presenting to me, and I'll be implementing the best ideas immediately. The actions we take in the next few hours will determine whether TechFlow survives this crisis or becomes another cautionary tale about data security failures. As the other participants immediately began working, Isabella found herself frozen by the magnitude of the situation. This wasn't about impressing anyone or winning a competition anymore. Real people were affected. Millions of TechFlow users who trusted the company with their personal information, thousands of employees whose jobs depended on how well the crisis was managed, and Ryan himself, whose life's work was under attack. She opened her laptop and began doing what she did best, diving into the data to understand the full scope of the problem. But as she analyzed the information Ryan had provided, she noticed something that didn't quite make sense. The pattern of the data breach didn't match typical hacking methods she had read about in cybersecurity reports. Most hackers who targeted user databases were looking for financial information or data they could sell on the dark web, but this breach had specifically targeted personal project files, documents, designs, and research that would have very little value to typical cybercriminals but could be incredibly valuable to competitors or foreign governments interested in industrial espionage. Isabella spent the next hour building a detailed analysis of the breach pattern, cross-referencing it with cybersecurity databases and recent reports of similar attacks. What she found made her increasingly concerned. This wasn't a random attack by opportunistic hackers. It appeared to be a sophisticated, targeted operation designed to steal intellectual property and business intelligence. Meanwhile, the other participants were developing their response strategies. She could hear Maria Santos on a phone call, apparently contacting crisis management specialists she had worked with before. Rachel Kim was reviewing TechFlow's existing cybersecurity protocols, looking for weaknesses that needed to be addressed immediately. Nancy Williams was drafting press releases and social media responses designed to minimize reputational damage. As Isabella continued her analysis, she realized that while the other women were focused on managing the immediate crisis, Nobody was addressing what might be the most important question. Who was behind the attack and what were they really after? She opened a new document and began outlining her findings. The data breach was sophisticated enough to suggest state-sponsored hackers or industrial espionage, but the timing was suspicious. TechFlow was in the middle of developing a revolutionary new AI system that could have applications in everything from medical research to financial analysis. If competitors or foreign governments had learned about this project, they might be willing to go to extraordinary lengths to steal the technology. But there was another possibility that Isabella found even more troubling. What if the breach wasn't about stealing existing technology, but about disrupting TechFlow's development process and damaging the company's reputation right before a major product launch? When the 2-hour preparation period ended, Ryan called everyone back together. The atmosphere in the room was intense, and Isabella could see the stress on his face as he dealt with constant phone calls and messages from his executive team, board members, and media outlets. "Let's start with immediate response actions," he said, looking at Nancy Williams. "What should we be telling our users and the media?" Nancy had prepared a comprehensive communication strategy that focused on transparency and taking responsibility. "We need to get ahead of the story instead of being reactive," she explained. "I recommend a 3-part approach. Immediate notification to affected users with clear steps they should take to protect themselves. A detailed statement to media that explains exactly what happened and what we're doing about it. And a series of follow-up communications that demonstrate our commitment to improved security." Her presentation was polished and professional, addressing everything from social media messaging to customer service protocols. Ryan took notes and asked several questions about timing and coordination with legal requirements. Rachel Kim went next, focusing on technical security improvements. She had identified several vulnerabilities in TechFlow's current systems and developed a plan to address them immediately. "The first priority has to be ensuring that this can't happen again," she said. "We need to implement additional authentication layers, improve monitoring systems, and conduct a comprehensive security audit of all our platforms." Her recommendations were thorough and technically sound, though Isabella noticed that they would be expensive and time-consuming to implement. Rachel seemed to understand the business implications, suggesting a phased approach that would address the most critical vulnerabilities first. Maria Santos presented a broader crisis management strategy that went beyond the immediate technical and communication challenges. Data breaches can destroy companies, but they can also become turning points that lead to stronger, more trustworthy organizations, she said. "The key is demonstrating that you're not just fixing the problem, but learning from it and using it to become better." Her approach included everything from customer retention programs to employee communication strategies to investor relations. She had clearly handled similar crises before and understood how they could affect every aspect of a business. Lisa Chang focused on legal and regulatory issues, which were complex and potentially devastating if not handled properly. "Depending on where our affected users are located, we could be facing regulatory investigations in multiple countries," she warned. "We need to ensure that our response meets all legal requirements and positions us as cooperative and responsible if there are formal proceedings." Rebecca Thompson approached the crisis from an investor's perspective, analyzing how the breach would affect TechFlow's valuation and future funding opportunities. "The market hates uncertainty more than bad news," she explained. "If we can demonstrate that we have a clear plan and the resources to implement it, we can minimize the long-term financial impact." Finally, it was Isabella's turn, as she stood up to present her analysis. 6 months after the partnership challenge and the crisis that changed everything, Isabella Rodriguez Thompson stood in the same conference room where it all began. But everything about her presence there was different. Gone was the nervous data analyst who had stumbled into a competition by mistake. In her place stood the co-founder and chief strategy officer of TechFlow's new AI division, wearing confidence as naturally as her tailored business suit. The room was packed with investors, media representatives, and tech industry leaders who had come to witness the official launch of TechFlow's revolutionary AI platform, the same technology that hackers had tried to steal during those intense days of crisis management. What they were really seeing, though Isabella didn't think of it this way, was the successful culmination of the most unusual partnership search in Silicon Valley history. Ryan stood beside her at the presentation podium, and their professional dynamic was obvious to anyone who watched them work together. Where he was bold and decisive, she was thoughtful and analytical. Where she identified patterns and potential problems, he translated insights into action. Where he pushed for rapid growth and expansion, she ensured they had the data and systems to support sustainable success. 18 months ago, Ryan began his presentation. TechFlow was a successful company with a traditional approach to business development. Today, we're launching technology that will revolutionize how businesses understand and serve their customers, thanks to an approach that combines aggressive innovation with careful analysis of market patterns and user needs. Isabella took over the presentation smoothly. Their transitions practiced from dozens of investor meetings and board presentations over the past months. Our AI platform doesn't just process data. It identifies patterns that humans miss and provides insights that can transform how companies make decisions about everything, from product development to customer service to strategic planning. As she spoke, Isabella remembered how terrified she had been just 6 months ago at the thought of presenting to a room full of accomplished professionals. Now she was explaining complex technical concepts to some of the most important people in the tech industry, and it felt natural rather than intimidating. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. After the crisis ended and Ryan offered her the partnership position, Isabella had spent weeks wondering if she was making a terrible mistake by leaving her comfortable analyst role for the uncertainty of helping build something entirely new. The other partnership challenge participants had supported her decision in ways that surprised her. Nancy Williams had become TechFlow's head of communications and had helped Isabella develop the public speaking and media skills she needed for her new role. Rachel Kim had joined as chief security officer and worked closely with Isabella to ensure that their rapid growth didn't create new vulnerabilities. Even Patricia Martinez, who had been one of the most competitive participants, had invested in TechFlow's latest funding round and become an informal advisor on scaling operations efficiently. The most important lesson we learned during our development process, Isabella continued, clicking to a slide that showed impressive growth metrics, is that the most powerful innovations come from combining different types of expertise, rather than trying to duplicate existing approaches. She could see Ryan smiling slightly at that comment, knowing it referred to much more than their business strategy. Their personal relationship had developed as naturally as their professional partnership, built on mutual respect, complementary strengths, and a shared commitment to building something meaningful together. The engagement ring on Isabella's left hand caught the light as she gestured toward the presentation screen, and several people in the audience noticed it. Their relationship had become something of a Silicon Valley legend. The CEO who found his perfect partner not among the accomplished executives who competed for his attention, but in the quiet analyst who had been working in his company all along. But the real story, Isabella knew, was more complex and more interesting than the fairy tale version that tech blogs like to tell. The crisis that had brought them together had also taught them both important lessons about leadership, collaboration, and the difference between competing with someone and partnering with them. Our beta testing phase involved over 10,000 users across 15 industries, Isabella reported, and the results exceeded our projections in every category. Companies using our AI platform saw an average of 32% improvement in customer satisfaction scores, 27% reduction in operational costs, and 41% improvement in strategic decision-making accuracy. The impressive statistics drew murmurs of approval from the investors in the audience, but Isabella was more proud of what the numbers represented, our proof that their collaborative approach to problem-solving could create real value for other businesses struggling with complex challenges. Ryan took over for the final section of the presentation, outlining their expansion plans and market strategy. As he spoke, Isabella reflected on how much had changed since that first day of the partnership challenge. She had discovered strengths she never knew she had, while also learning to value the analytical skills that she had previously seen as limitations rather than assets. More importantly, she had learned that true partnership wasn't about finding someone exactly like yourself or someone who would follow your lead without question. It was about finding someone whose different strengths created new possibilities that neither person could achieve alone. Before we take questions, Ryan said, I want to share something that isn't in our investor materials but is crucial to understanding how TechFlow approaches innovation and growth. He clicked to a slide that showed photos from the original partnership challenge, including images from the crisis management sessions when they had all worked together to address the security breach. Isabella hadn't expected him to include this personal history in a business presentation, but she understood why he had chosen to do it. 6 months ago, TechFlow faced the biggest crisis in our company's history, Ryan explained. A sophisticated cyber attack that threatened not just our data security, but our entire business model and reputation. The solution came not from any single expert or traditional crisis management approach, but from a team of people with different backgrounds and expertise who were willing to challenge assumptions and think creatively about complex problems. He gestured toward Isabella. My business partner and fiancé identified patterns in the attack that cybersecurity experts had missed, leading to the discovery that we were facing industrial espionage rather than simple data theft. Her insights didn't just help us resolve the immediate crisis, they led to the development of the security and analytical frameworks that make our current AI platform possible. Isabella felt her cheeks warm slightly, still not entirely comfortable being the center of attention, even after months of presentations and media interviews. But she also felt proud of how far she had come from the nervous analyst who had accidentally ended up in the partnership challenge. The lesson for our investors and partners, Ryan continued, is that TechFlow's approach to innovation is based on the same principle that guided us through that crisis. We don't just look for the most obvious solutions or try to copy what other successful companies are doing. We combine different perspectives and analytical approaches to identify opportunities that others miss. During the question and answer session that followed, Isabella fielded technical questions about the AI platform's capabilities, while Ryan handled business and financial inquiries. Their division of expertise was natural and effective, demonstrating the kind of complementary partnership that they had built both professionally and personally. One investor asked about their plans for handling competitive pressure from larger tech companies who were developing similar AI platforms. Isabella and Ryan exchanged a quick glance. They had anticipated this question and had prepared their response together. Competition is inevitable in any innovative field, Isabella replied. But our advantage isn't just in our technology. It's in our approach to understanding and solving complex problems. While other companies focus on building the most sophisticated algorithms, we focus on identifying the patterns and insights that create real value for users. Ryan added, we've learned that the best defense against competition isn't trying to build higher walls around your technology. It's staying ahead by continuing to innovate and understanding your market better than anyone else does. After the presentation ended, Isabella and Ryan were surrounded by investors, journalists, and potential partners wanting to discuss collaboration opportunities. As they worked the room together, Isabella marveled at how natural their partnership had become. They complemented each other's conversational styles, built on each other's responses to questions, and presented a unified vision for their company's future. During a brief quiet moment between conversations, Ryan pulled Isabella aside. So, was this what you expected when you accidentally ended up in the partnership challenge? Isabella laughed. Nothing about the last 6 months has been what I expected. A year ago, I thought success meant doing good analytical work and hoping someone would notice eventually. The hours following Isabella's revelation about the potential industrial espionage transformed the entire dynamic of the partnership challenge. What had started as a competition between accomplished women had become something entirely different, a real-time collaboration to save a company under attack. Ryan had immediately implemented a war room approach, setting up multiple workstations in the conference room where different teams could tackle various aspects of the crisis simultaneously. The retreat center's elegant conference space now looked more like a mission control center, with laptops, phones, documents, and coffee cups covering every available surface. Isabella found herself working directly with Ryan at the central coordination station, helping him analyze incoming data and make sense of the rapidly evolving situation. It was surreal. Just 3 days ago, she had been a mid-level data analyst who rarely spoke up in meetings, and now she was advising the CEO of a billion-dollar company during the biggest crisis in its history. The FBI Cybercrimes Unit is sending a team, Ryan said, hanging up from another call. They want to see your analysis of the attack patterns. They said it matches intelligence they've been gathering about a sophisticated hacking operation that's been targeting multiple tech companies. Isabella felt a mixture of vindication and concern. Being right about the industrial espionage was satisfying, but it also meant that TechFlow was facing a much more serious threat than a simple data breach. "What else do they know?" she asked, pulling up additional data she had been analyzing. "Not much that they can share yet," Ryan replied. "But apparently we're not the first company to be hit. They think there's a coordinated effort to steal AI technology from multiple firms, possibly funded by foreign governments or large corporations looking to gain a competitive advantage." As they worked together, Isabella began to notice something interesting about Ryan's leadership style during the crisis. Unlike the authoritative take-charge approach she had expected from someone with his reputation, he was surprisingly collaborative. He listened carefully to everyone's input, asked thoughtful questions, and made decisions quickly but not impulsively. More importantly, he seemed to genuinely value her analytical perspective in a way that none of her previous supervisors had. When she suggested cross-referencing the breach data with employee access logs to identify potential insider threats, he immediately asked the security team to make it a priority. When she pointed out patterns in the timing of the attack that suggested the hackers had been planning this for months, he used that information to brief the FBI team. "You know," Ryan said during a brief break between crisis management calls, "I designed this whole partnership challenge to find someone who could think differently about problems and see things I might miss. I just never expected it to happen during an actual emergency." Isabella looked around the room, where the other participants were still working on various aspects of the crisis response. Nancy was coordinating with TechFlow's public relations team to manage media coverage. Rachel was working with the technical security team to implement additional protective measures. Maria was helping to develop employee communication strategies to maintain morale during the crisis. "They're all contributing important work," Isabella said. "This situation needs all of their expertise." "You're right," Ryan agreed. "But what you brought to this situation is something different. You didn't just apply your existing knowledge to the problem. You looked at it from an angle that none of us had considered. That's exactly the kind of thinking I need in a partner." The word partner hung in the air between them, carrying implications that went far beyond the business crisis they were managing. Isabella realized that sometime during the intense hours of working together, the artificial nature of the partnership challenge had disappeared. They weren't performing for each other anymore. They were simply two people working together to solve problems. And it felt natural in a way that surprised both of them. Their collaboration was interrupted by an urgent call from TechFlow's chief technology officer. The security team had discovered something troubling while implementing Rachel's recommended security improvements. "We found evidence of additional, unauthorized access attempts," the CTO reported over speakerphone. "It looks like the hackers who conducted the original breach have been trying to get back into our systems using different methods. They're specifically targeting our AI development servers." Isabella immediately pulled up the network monitoring data on her laptop. "When did these new attempts start?" "About 2 hours ago," the CTO replied, "right around the time news of the original breach started spreading widely." Isabella studied the data patterns, feeling a familiar excitement as she recognized what she was seeing. "They're not trying to steal more data," she said suddenly. "They're trying to plant something." Ryan leaned over to look at her screen. "What do you mean?" "Look at this pattern," Isabella explained, highlighting specific data points. "These aren't extraction attempts, they're insertion attempts. The hackers are trying to put something into our systems, not take something out. My guess is they want to plant malware or backdoors that would give them permanent access. Or maybe they're trying to sabotage our AI development work by corrupting the code." This realization added a new level of urgency to the crisis response. It wasn't enough to fix the security vulnerabilities and notify affected users. They needed to hunt down and eliminate whatever the hackers were trying to install in TechFlow's systems. "Can we trace where these new attempts are coming from?" Ryan asked. Isabella was already working on that question, cross-referencing the attack data with international cybersecurity databases. "Give me 10 minutes, she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. As she worked, Ryan coordinated with the FBI team and the internal security specialists. Isabella could hear him on multiple phone calls, clearly explaining the situation and making decisions about resource allocation and priorities. She was impressed by how he managed to stay calm and focused despite the enormous pressure and complexity of the situation. What impressed her even more was how he incorporated her insights into his decision-making process. When she mentioned that the attack patterns suggested the hackers were working from a time zone about 12 hours ahead of California, he immediately shared that information with law enforcement. When her analysis indicated that the attempts were becoming more sophisticated and frequent, he authorized additional emergency security measures that would be expensive but necessary. "Got something," Isabella announced after 20 minutes of intense data analysis. "The new attack attempts are coming from at least 6 different locations, but they're all using similar techniques and targeting the same specific vulnerabilities. This is definitely a coordinated operation and they're getting more aggressive." She turned her laptop screen toward Ryan, showing him a map with attack locations highlighted. "Based on the timing patterns and technical signatures, I think they know we're onto them. They're trying to complete whatever their mission is before we can shut them out completely." Ryan studied the data, then made a decision that surprised everyone in the room. "We're going to accelerate the launch of our new AI platform." The announcement caused an immediate stir among the participants and the TechFlow executives who had joined the crisis response effort. Accelerating a major product launch during a security crisis seemed like exactly the wrong thing to do. "If they're after our AI technology," Ryan explained, "the best defense might be to get it to market before they can steal or sabotage it. Once it's public, there's no competitive advantage to stealing it, and we'll have first-mover advantage in the marketplace." Isabella understood the logic immediately, but she could also see potential problems with the approach. "That's risky," she said carefully. "If we rush the launch and there are bugs or security issues with the platform, we could be creating new vulnerabilities for them to exploit. What would you recommend?" Ryan asked, and Isabella realized that he was genuinely asking for her opinion on a decision that could determine the future of his company. She took a deep breath, thinking through the implications. This was the kind of high-stakes decision-making that she had always avoided in her previous roles. But the crisis had pushed her into a position where avoiding decisions wasn't an option. "I think we should do a limited beta launch," she said finally. "Release the core functionality to a small group of trusted users and partners, but keep the most advanced features under wraps until we're sure our security is completely solid. That way we establish our market position without exposing everything we've developed." Ryan considered her suggestion, discussing it with the other executives and security specialists. After 20 minutes of intense debate, he decided to implement her recommended approach. As the day progressed, Isabella found herself working more and more closely with Ryan on strategic decisions, rather than just data analysis. He asked her opinion on communication strategies, resource allocation priorities, and long-term business implications of the crisis response choices they were making. She realized that what was happening between them went beyond the crisis management situation. Their working relationship had evolved into something that felt like genuine partnership.